This segment is brought to you by Jigmaster Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
You're listening to Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast with your hosts Ryan Milford and Sean Lavery. Welcome back to Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm Ryan Milford, and we got Sean Lavery in here.
Hey guys.
And today we are doing another host interview. We have one of the newest hosts here at Paddle and Fin. We got Armando Solá.
Got it.
All right. Y'all don't
nailed it.
I had to ask him right before we started recording, to make sure I got it right. Yeah, I was so scared I was still going to butcher it. But yeah, so welcome to the podcast. Welcome to our segment and everything. I think you're going to bring some cool new, what am I trying to say? Some cool new stuff, to the podcast that we didn't have already. So. But for people that, haven't heard about you coming on and everything, you want to give like a little background on who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Sure, man. Well, like you said, my name is Armando Solá. I live in Texas right now. I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area about 11 years ago. I'm originally born and raised in Puerto Rico. Started bank fishing out of lakes and beach where my dad would take me fishing. So that was really what speared that passion for fishing. And like I was mentioning, and I think in the OG show, as I started growing up, fishing is expensive, rods, reels, everything. But I love the passion for it. I used to sit down every weekend, and my mom said she would get up and I was already on the floor with my tackle box, my rods, and watching like Bill Dance and those outdoor sports programs that would come in either, I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. But she would say she'd wake up and I was already there, with my tackle box and everything. So I was a big fan of it. As I grew older, I got more into surfing and all that, and bodyboarding. And then when I moved to Texas, that's where I learned bass fishing and kayak bass fishing from a close friend of mine. So I've been for the last 5 years actively, fishing for bass, and in the last 2 years, I've been really focusing on kayak bass fishing. So it's awesome.
What do you fish for in Puerto Rico?
Man, I was so young when we started fishing out of I don't even remember, probably like catfish or stuff like that. I remember just going to the bank on the freshwaters and just digging holes and finding, worms, and then just throwing out a hook and throwing it out there. And then the same thing, when we would go like stay at a resort or go to the beach or something, then I already had my tackle bugs with some soft plastics. I remember I used to throw like a makeshift Carolina rig because I saw one of the shows how they did it. And actually, I think that I remember I was really young, but my first catch was actually it was probably like a small reef fish, maybe 1 or 2 pounds. I can't remember if it was a grouper or rock bass, whatever it was. I don't know. But that was my first catch, and it was on saltwater. And ever since then, man, it's been a passion.
For those of you guys who don't know where Armando came from, he's actually no stranger to podcasts. He actually started his own podcast. You want to talk a little bit about that, Armando?
Yeah, I started my own podcast called Bass, Kayak, and Beers at the beginning of February. A lot of it inspired by Paddle and Fin and Dark Waters kayak fishing podcast. I've always had the passion for to interview people. Like when growing up, when I was here, I was always interested in when they interview like superstars like Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, of all different types of sports. And I was always intrigued on when, the interviews they would do and all that. And so I really loved I really had that journalistic itch with me all the time. It's funny, and I'm going off topic a little bit. When the whole um, Major League Baseball steroid scandal started, I would listen to players, kind of like dodge questions and all that, and I was always like, who's training these guys to like, such successful, but the stuff they're coming out of their mouths, it's just like, so simple if you just, handle it the appropriate way. So I really love that. And watching fishing shows and watching Fluke Master, Chad Hoover, I always wonder what it'd be like to talk to them about it. And it never occurred to me to do a podcast. I've never, like, I feel kind of embarrassed, but I've never realized the concept of a podcast. My wife loves to listen to podcasts, and I think I came home one day from work, she was listening to a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, there is such a thing as podcast. And I wonder, it's like, man, I wonder if there are kayak fishing podcasts. And sure enough, I found you guys. I found Dark Waters Kayak Fishing, and I immediately, it's just like, man, this is something I would love to do. This is always what I wanted to do, like interview people, talk to people about something that I'm passionate for. So I started doing it. I started posting it on my social media accounts on Instagram, saying that I was going to start doing a podcast. But I was super nervous about putting my voice out there, especially because English is not my first language. I always how do you say this? You see, forgot the word sometimes. But I always lack in confidence when I speak English. So I put it out there kind of like hoping that I would pressure myself to say, I put it out there, now I have to do it. Now I have to start it. And sure enough, like a week later or 2 weeks later, Josh Smith from Dark Waters Kayak Fishing, who I've never met, messaged me directly, and he says, hey dude, what, how Josh Smith is, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. So he gave me that, that high school football coach pep talk, where it's just like, getting you pumped up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna start doing it. So I started doing it, and I would listen to you guys and listen to Dark Waters and kind of like not imitate, but kind of like get ideas and how you start, how you guys do it. So I started interviewing like anybody that I could get to come to the show. I've tried to get tournament anglers, but of course they're already doing your shows and Dark Waters and all other shows that are out there. So it was a headache to try to get them. So I would just pick anybody out of social media, and that's how I got going. And then I started listening to Bass Fishing for Noobs, and I loved the idea, like we were talking right before recording, that idea of getting to talk to experts of kayak fishing and getting their, having firsthand knowledge, like instead of just listening to them on social media, actually talking to them about how to work a certain technique. It's like, that's a great idea for me to, learn, because I have to catch up. I didn't grow up from a bass fishing culture, so I'm just catching up in the last 5 years. And bass is very, very tricky to catch bass. Unlike anything else, I in my opinion. Now, granted, I haven't fished for a lot of things, but it's something that you're always learning, you're always working. So that got me into doing the segment, which was Kayak Fishing 101. That's when I started splitting my show. One was called the Call of Real Life, which is just talking to people that love fishing, love kayak fishing, but also have a life and try to juggle one thing and another. And I had the opportunity to talk to some great people that struggle with different things and how kayak fishing fits into them. So that was my favorite show. And then Kayak Fishing 101 was to get them to talk about their techniques, and something that I've learned so much from doing that. Sorry, I got long-winded there, but that was basically Bass Kayak and Beers when I started.
And like, I completely feel you on the whole thing, like trying to get, people with, a little bit bigger name in the industry to come on. When I started Bass Fishing for Noobs, like, it started as its own podcast, and I was a nobody in the kayak fishing community knew who I was. And, then I couldn't hardly find anybody to come on.
Yeah.
And, I got Brian to come on, and we did an interview, and I guess he liked the way I went about the interview or something for some reason, because, those episodes that I did on the podcast are garbage. But he brought me on, and even still being under the Paddle and Fin name, I still had a hard time there for a while. And I think now, I'm not a somebody or nothing like that, but more people in the industry know who I am from the podcast, and so it's a little easier to get people to. And plus, the podcast itself is Paddle and Fin itself has grown, so more people know about it and everything. But yeah, back then, dude, it was so hard. I can't tell you how many times I had to have a conversation with Brian, like, dude, I need help with something because I ain't got nothing for this week, and I got like a day or two until my episode comes out, and I ain't got nothing. So that I got anxiety anyway, so that sucks. That feeling like, am I gonna be able to get that episode in time or not? But yeah, ran over. You know what? I do want to start another rant real quick, though. This is kind of off subject, and I apologize, but there's been some stuff going on. Okay, so my wife is pretty big into watching the show Glee, and I've watched quite a bit of it with her. And one of the actresses from that show just drowned, and wasn't wearing a PFD. Wear y'all's damn PFDs. Like, I'm so sick of seeing people dying for no reason in the water for not having a PFD on. They make too many different styles that are comfortable, that aren't very hot and all that, to not wear them. There's no reason you can't wear it. There's no good excuse for it. Please wear your PFDs. Your spouse, your kids, your parents, your siblings, your friends, all that, they don't want to have to bury you. So wear your PFD, please. Ran over.
Yeah, we had that same weekend, Susie Roloff, not Susie Roloff, but she was on a tournament, and somebody on her lake, same thing, fell off the board and drowned. I was actually fishing on the Slay Nation Texas Trail that same day on Ray Roberts, and there was a guy, I think it was Jackson, it was an old kayak. I think it was Jackson. He actually had it spray paint over it, like he had it really personalized. But he got a makeshift trolling motor on it and all that. And he, I guess he was fishing for crappies. I don't know how smart this is, but a lot of guys on boats, what they do when they're fishing for crappies underneath the bridge, they're usually, when you see a bridge, you'll see some rope hanging out of the bridge, and they'll tie their boats. Well, this guy tied his kayak, and I guess there was a little bit of wind current, and it started filling up his kayak with water. So he decided to let go of cut the rope loose. Then he realized the kayak is about to go under. So he jumped out of the kayak, grabbed the kayak with one hand, and started to dog pedal his way to the shore underneath the bridge, which wasn't far away. And I'm seeing this from a football field away. And as soon as I saw it, I booked it on my Hobie Outback, and I was just going straight at the guy to see, if you need any help. But by the time I got there, he was already in shallow water. But he didn't have a PFD on his kayak. Like, I understand in Texas, you don't have to wear your PFD, but there has to be one in your kayak. I always wear mine.
That's a law here too. You have to have
but
one.
It's like, dude, how do you not have? Like, I wanted to say a couple of things to him about it, but I'm like, he made it to shore, so we'll help him out, and I help him out gathering some of the stuff we're floating away. So I'm happy he was okay. But it's, how do you not have a freaking PFD on your kayak with a trolling motor on it? It's just, I get what you say, man. It's sad, and it's something that can totally avoidable if people just have 2 cents on it,
Totally. It's only a matter of time that you're going to go in the water. It is the nature of the sport that we partake in, man. And especially the lady in California, I mean, she was on a boat with her child, and
Yeah,
I mean,
like
I'm
a 3 or
surprised the
4-year-old.
child even survived because he was just left stranded on the boat. I'm like, think of at least your kids. I mean, holy cow. So
Yeah, and I've only heard bits and pieces of the story, but like from what I understand, they were swimming in the water. The kid had its life jacket on, and after she went under, the kid climbed back in the boat itself, and it was like 3 or 4 years old, and it was out there by itself till, I guess somebody discovered it or something. God,
crazy.
but now that child has to grow up without a mother because she, like I hate, it's such a kind of a touchy way to go about this subject because you don't want to sound condescending about like oh, you don't wear your life jacket, make people think they like you are self-righteous because you wear your life jacket, but it's not like that. We don't want children having to grow up without a parent or all that. Yeah. All right.
So, well, where should we start? So you said you're fishing out of an Outback, right?
Yeah, Hobie Outback.
That's actually what I am fishing out of. So
nice. I love
it. I'm happy to hear that, man.
I love it.
So Ryan and I were talking like we'll get your top 3 techniques. What is your go-to, your confidence?
Man, jerkbait, surprisingly jerkbait, because it's not an easy technique to, I guess, master. But for whatever reason, as soon as I started fishing out of with a jerkbait, I've had tons of success with the jerkbait, just around docks, especially. I love to use it as a search bait when I'm going from point. If I'm looking at the Navionics, the maps, whatever, the charts, and I'm going from point A to point B. And I figured, I'm not fishing all the way from point A to point B. I just want to get from this point to that point as soon as possible. I just usually throw in a jerk bait that's, depending on the depth of the lake, but I try to throw something that'll get that 10 to 15 feet suspended bass that are so hard to take. And I just start paddling from point A to point B. And the amount of times that I've actually caught something, bass and big bass that are just suspended it's crazy. I'm not even looking for them. I'm just saying while I'm at it, let me just throw something out there. So that's the way that I mostly use the jerkbait. And I found a ton of success. Now it's not my favorite way to fish it, but I'm just saying it. I recommend anybody that's wants to learn bass and you're in a tournament. If you need to go from point A to point B, throw a jerkbait, and start trolling it on your way to your other spot. You never know. And I found like tons of bass that way, and big bass as well. You get those suspended bass that are so hard to get sometimes. And again on docks, my best day on a jerkbait, I was looking at the weather the night before, and it said thunderstorms rolling in at 12. Now it's Texas. It's crazy here. So I figured, okay, I'll be at the lake by 6 a.m. before the thunderstorm hit and come back. By the time I got to the lake, thunderstorms had rolled in at 6 a.m. And I already had my kayak and everything ready to go. I already got it out of my pickup truck. I was ready to go. All of a sudden, boom, I was like, I'll just have to go back to the car and wait it out. And it lasted a couple of hours. Like it was one after another. So in between storm cells, I would just cast out of the bank, waiting for all of it to go and just watching it on the app until finally, like a couple hours later, the storms were gone. Now it was a day that was supposed to be like 100 degrees out there, so I didn't take any top water. I didn't take anything for top water. But what happened was that weather cooled down the water so much, and after the storm passed, there was no winds at all, and all of a sudden it was top water heaven. I mean, bass exploding everywhere. And I later find out the reason for that is that cold water starts descending, and bait fish start coming up. So it started bringing the bass, and it was one cast after another I was like, what do I throw? I left all the top water at home or in the car. So what the heck am I going to throw? So I figured, let me throw a jerkbait. And it was like for the first 10 casts, it was just, throw it in, boom, boom, bam. and got it. I mean, it was one after another, one after another. So I immediately fell in love with fishing for jerkbait. I think that was the first time I used a jerkbait. And then I guess go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, did you say you troll it when you're going from point A to point B? I never even thought to try that.
Oh man, it's crazy. That at that day specifically, I wasn't trolling. I was just throwing it out there. But yeah, no, from that's what I like to do, just so I can get the feel for the lake. Some people might say it's like, oh, that's kind of like cheating. I know I've heard comments on posts and all that about people. Some people hate trolling, and I get why. It's not what I do, what I ordinarily do. I just say from point A to point B, let me find out, especially if I'm a body of water that I've never been, and I see suspended bass at 10 or fish at least at that 10, 15. I'm like, that's what I'm going to do if I need to point from point A to point B and see what happens. And again, a lot of times I end up catching a big bass that I wasn't expecting. A lot of times it doesn't work, but you'd be surprised how much it works.
Okay.
See, I've heard Susie Roloff talk about doing that, and in her league, like, you're not allowed to like troll, like put it in a fish or like a rod holder and do all that. But if you got a pedal drive, see, I believe she said her loophole she did with that, she keeps it in her hand and she pedals and kind of trolls that way with it still in her hand. That way, it's kind of a loophole in the rule where she can still kind of troll, but they're happy.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've actually heard that. But you asking about my 3, I think that's the main one. Senkos, flipping Senkos. I mean, I started recently, and shout out to Fluke Master. He actually posted a video a couple of months ago called The Forgotten Rig. And it's that Senko with a little weight on one side, like a Neko rig, but Texas rig on one side and a Neko weight on the other. Oh my God. That thing, especially on spawning, that thing will land you huge bass, man. I love that technique. It is essentially like a cross between a net rig and a Neko rig, but it's weedless. And I've thrown it on grass. I flip it underneath docks. I've used it. I'll add a heavier weight, nail weight on it, and I'll use it for more deep ledges. And that's my other favorite technique, man. That thing that's the easiest. And he mentioned it on the video. I was like, well, if he mentioned it, I'll give it a try. And sure enough, man, that's the easiest way to catch a fish. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of success I've had with that. And not to go too long with it, I think my other one is crankbaits. That's my other favorite one. Now, for the life of me, are trying to get better at jigs, but jigs, I don't know what it is. I struggle so much with fishing on jigs. Mine's having difficulty there with this.
No, I was looking at your bullseye.
Oh, the bullseye.
And yours is, we both got them here, but like mine's inside the bracket. And I noticed your bracket goes underneath it. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? Am I wearing it right, or
I may be wearing it wrong? I don't know.
Do you have
John,
it?
What do you think? Which one's the right way?
Mine is like Ryan's. That's how
then I got it wrong. My bad. I don't
know how. Did you stick it on there?
It sticks there. That's what I thought. But no, that makes sense. Let me fix that.
Maybe yours is the right way.
If it works, it works. I was just trying.
Oh man, but wait a minute. So let me look at yours. I know we're getting off subject here. How does
yours? Maybe yours is the way it's supposed to be. I don't know.
I mean, I think you can. I think you can do it really however you want to, as long as.
No, it makes sense because you have a little like cup holder. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I'm such an idiot. Look how embarrassed. That's embarrassing.
Look,
Can we edit this out? I was hoping to get sponsored by Angler, but they're not going to sponsor me. I was like, look at this idiot wearing this all wrong. God, at least I'm in the Bass Fishing for Noob segment,
Yeah, you come here.
You're in the right place.
I'm in the right place, right?
You come to teach us stuff, and you're learning from us.
I'll have to fix it. Hold up. Man, all this time. And I kind of saw it. I was like, maybe I'm doing it wrong. But there you go. You see, I learned something back. Always learning with Ryan and Sean, man. Always.
That's what we're here for while we do this.
Thank you.
But I'm gonna have to try that Forgotten rig, man, because I was reading about They're calling it the little child rig, and it's basically a big TRD, almost like not the small, the 3-inch or whatever they are. It's like the 5-inch one, and it's Texas rigged at the top with some kind of weight in the bottom. So it sounds similar to that. And I remember seeing that Fluke Master Forgotten rig too, but I will have to try that more. I have caught one or a few fish on the what they call it, the little child rig, and so I'm going to try it with Senkos now too. Now that you say that.
Is that the Wire to Fish video? Because I know Wire to Fish made one. I haven't seen. That's the one, right? I haven't seen it, but I saw their post. I'm like, oh, it's the same. That's the same that Footmaster did.
Yeah, pretty much. They use like the Z-Man shroom weights where you just kind of push it into the bottom of instead of a nail weight. But it's basically the same thing. So, and it is very weedless. Like I was throwing it down through like trees with underwater trees, and it was coming right through the branches and everything. So it's definitely good for that.
No, it is. And the only and now that we're talking about him, maybe we can. It is bass fishing for noobs, so we can share that tip. I use the TRD if I'm shallow because you stand up. But if I'm going to deep ledges, like I'm saying deep ledges, 15, 20 feet, I don't like the TRD. The reason for it takes too long to get down there because the TRD floats, especially if you use that big Magnum TRD.
Yep.
The one that I've gotten the best result on, and this is, shameless plug or not, but I'm not sponsored by them, is the, God, I forgot what it was now. Of course I did.
Good thing you're not sponsored by them.
Berkeley's Power Bait. They have like a big, I think it's the 6-inch Senko style.
Mm-hmm.
That one with the green with the purple flakes, man, that has gotten me so much. I've tried the dark, the black and blues and all that, and sometimes works on stained water. But that green with the purple flakes on the Berkeley's Power Bait.
And they're pretty. I was going to say they're pretty heavily scented too, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
My Paul Strom, who we've had on here, was just showing me those. I went fishing with him not long ago, and he was showing me that's what he likes as well. So hopefully, I'm not spilling his secret sauce there, but.
Yeah, it is a great. I recommend anybody trying it, and it's so easy to cast and so easy to retrieve. I mean, there's no really wrong way of doing it. But that's the only difference that I would recommend. If you're going for deep, may not want to do the TRD just because it takes longer. The advantage of the TRD is it stands up. Now, when you're going for shallow, if you do the small TRDs, and you have to have a light wire hook, because when I started throwing the TRDs, I would have like a heavy wired hook on it. And the thing about it is that wire hook would bring it down just like a Senko, because it's the hook. And I don't have any of my baits here with me, but basically you Texas rig it, and the hook is right at the top, like right at the very tip of the top. So it does, even if you have a TRD, if you have that regular 4-inch TRDs, and you have a heavy wired hook, it's gonna topple to the side once it hits the water. So just because you're using a TRD doesn't mean it's gonna float like a net rig. You have to have either if you have it on as a light setup like I do, I have it on spin cast medium. I think medium, and a 6-pound test fluoro. Then I use a light wire hook, and then the TRD is gonna stand up and stay that way. But you have to use a light wire hook, otherwise it's gonna topple over. If you're looking for that action where it stays standing up.
That's definitely a good tip. Thank you.
Freebie.
So okay, standard TRD versus the big TRD. Go.
What do you like? What do I like? Which one?
I've never used the big TRD. To me, it's like, why not just go ahead and use a Senko?
Well, the big TRD. What I like is I like it when I'm trying to go. If I can see on the graph the big bass over there, and it's not that deep. I'm talking about 10 feet. Then I like to use that TRD that has that shad color or pattern. It's kind of like black on one side and kind of like silverback on the other one. I love to use that TRD for that. Now that is a heavy TRD, So you have to put the biggest shroom head you can get. And I don't know how many sizes they come. But that's the thing about Z-Man. They're cheap, but you have to buy their shroom head. You can't use a regular style head that you would use on a regular Senko because it's not gonna work. It's, you know how it's the thing about TRDs. It's very finicky. You know, you can't mix it with other plastic because I found out the hard way. I lost about about $20 in soft plastic when I opened the box the next day. Everything melted. I'm like, what the heck? It's winter. What happened here? And I texted a friend of mine and says, did you mix your TRDs with them? I'm like, yeah. And you can't do that. So I learned the hard way. So if you don't know that, do not mix your Z-Man with any other soft plastic. But so that's the thing about Z-Man. You know, I love them, but they're really finicky when it comes to that. You know, you need your own storage space, you need your own net rigs and your own hooks. My love and hate relationship with them is they're great, they're durable, but it's a nightmare to I don't how do you call it, to thread the hook on it, you know, to get him to come just right. I don't know why I struggle with it so much. But so I love the big TRDs for that, for when I'm trying to get if they're actively feeding and they're out there on the prowl, then I'll use that big TRD, try to land a big bass. You're not gonna get as much bass as you would with just like the typical 6-inch TRDs. But I mean, you have a chance of landing that big bass just because of the size of it.
So, okay, you said you're in the Hobie Outback. Are you more of a lake fisherman or a river fisherman?
Lake. I love to be more active on rivers. There's a couple of rivers around here, mostly creeks though. But yeah,
I heard Texas has got good rivers. Well, maybe not in your particular area.
Well, I mean, they have creeks. They have close to where I live. They have a few creeks that are great, and for fishing, especially on March and April when the sand bass run. Oh my God, that's sand bass heaven right there. You can get a limit any day if you get on that 2-week window, and you get them just right on up creeks that are feeding into big lakes. Man, you get a 25 limit real quick on sand bass, which I love. But going back to your question, I would love to get more involved in river fishing. There's a lot of river around here. The Guadalupe, the Trinity is. I've done the Trinity, but it's kind of disgusting as well, especially when because it goes right through downtown Fort Worth and then right to downtown Dallas. But there are some big fish there. But I would love to go into deep backwoods river and creek fishing. That's my next thing. I want to get a kayak for my wife, which is.
I hear you. I'm in the same boat, man.
It's gonna be my river, which is gonna be my river fishing. You know, when we can spend time together. You know. But that's what I've been looking at a few. I've been looking at that Shearwater, man. That's the only thing. It's kind of big. It's kind of like long. My thing with creek or skinny waters, I want a kayak where I can lay my rods down. I mean, because so often you got to go through brush and trees and all that, and it's a headache just trying to get your rod out of it and come back and put it back again and all that.
Well, see, that's why on my milk crate, I made my my rod holders horizontal, so my rods stick straight out the back, just for that reason.
Well, my fear with that is if I'm turning into tight spaces, knowing how clumsy I can be, I'm just gonna break my rods on a bend or something, on a sharp turn or something against a rock or a timber or something. That's why I like them on the side. So I've been struggling to find the perfect river kayak fishing for my budget. I was watching Christian Fisher did a great video on trying to kind of sell the idea of Hobie PA and P12 going on rivers, and I that video was pretty cool. It almost got me convinced of throwing a PA on a river. So that was a really good video. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but that was that was a really interesting video. I mean, I would never think to even consider it, but with the new fins that kick back, that's actually pretty good. I mean, I was convinced. I saw the video. I was like, man, that's not a bad idea.
Well, Sean takes his Outback on Susquehanna River.
Yes, I do, and and there are times where it gets a little sketchy. I do have the kick up fins, but it only works if you're going the direction, like, so if I let myself drift backwards and my fins are still facing forwards, if I hit something behind me, it's bad news. So,
oh man, just yesterday, I finally got my Bite FD back, and I took it out yesterday out on Duck River, and I was fishing and everything, and I was kind of in the middle of the river, and like I was floating forward, and I needed to back up, so I start pedaling real hard backwards, and all of a sudden I hit something. I still don't know what I hit because I'd been throwing in that area, and I wasn't getting snagged on anything, and all of a sudden I hit something. I don't know what it was, and I was like, I done broke a prop or something on this thing already, but everything was fine. I don't know if I hit a fish or something or what. I did see some decent sized gar swimming around in there, so maybe one swam up and I smacked it or something. I don't know, but man, it scared me. I thought I done broke something on the kayak.
Well, and I had my Outback out on the Susquehanna just last week, but right now it is so low. I was spending more time paddling than pedaling because I had to keep 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, and keep the fins up against the hull because it was so shallow, and I still ended up kind of scraping the bottom. I was like, so it's definitely not an ideal riverboat. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I was looking to replace my daughter's kayak with something a little bigger, so definitely know what you're talking about.
See, I would like to get my wife a kayak as well. But the only thing, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be kind of like a throw and go boat. In a way, like that's the other thing. It's gonna be something, that comfortable seat and everything, but lightweight where I can just pick it up and put it on my shoulder and go. It's hard to find a boat
right now, especially.
Yeah, but I was gonna say it's hard to find a boat that meets those qualifications that will hold a 260-pound guy and all his gear.
That I think it's the Molken, the new feel free that came out. I've been looking into that one because it's not expensive at all. It's like less than $700. It's lightweight and it has that keel that doubles as a little roller wheel.
Oh yeah.
And it has that.
I like about feel free.
Yeah, and it has those rod holders with the tip protectors on the side. You can put, because if I'm river fishing, I'm not taking. When I go to a lake, I'll take 7 rods, especially if I'm in a tournament. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I mean, I've talked to guys that bring like 12 rods, and I'm like, that is.
We got some here on the podcast.
Yeah. So, for river, I would only take like maybe 1 or 2. I'm just saying that maybe for start river fishing,
I took 3 rods yesterday. I took 3 with me yesterday.
Yeah, but I would love to get more involved in river fishing for sure.
Man, I like it. Like where I've been going, I've been paddling up, or I guess yesterday pedaling upriver. But like you come up on these little, I don't even know really what I say rapids, but I guess maybe like riprap. I don't know, it's real shallow, and the water gets a little faster and all that. But it comes a point in that where I got to get out and walk up through it and pull in my kayak, and I don't know. I love that. It feels more like I'm an adventure than just fishing. I think I've said that before, but that's what it is to me. And so like, it kind of sucked in a way yesterday because I waited till later to get out, and it was already like 90-something degrees, and I'm dragging this kayak up through all this. Man, I was burning up, and I'm out of shape anyways. So.
And the other thing about river fishing, which gets me a little bit, if I want to go river fishing, that one I would love to go with somebody else. Like I can go to a lake by myself, but river fishing, I'd like somebody else because of the dynamics of it, especially here in Texas. I recorded an episode with Manny Varela from Skinny Water Boys TV. He's gone through this, and so has Eric from Hook Up, Eric Celerio, I think. Anyway, Eric from Hook Up the Grind, those two of my favorite YouTubers. They do a lot of river fishing here in Texas, and it's Texas, man. They gone through stuff, and I actually recorded an episode with Manny Varela about this. The amount of times where they have people just pulled out a gun and either shot at the water next to them, or shot in the air, or just trying to shoot them, it's crazy. Here in Texas, it's just crazy, man.
That's scary,
I love
man.
Texas. I'm not hating on Texas. I love Texas. I loved it. I live here. But there has been, and he has recorded in it. And one thing that I talked about in that episode, this wasn't clickbait, because I know there's, we all know who they are. They bring the clickbait on, but this is more them just fishing on the Guadalupe River, up in like feeding creeks and all that. And all of a sudden, you get a landowner pull the gun and start shooting up in the air, or shooting at the water, trying to scare you off. I'm like, it's not about clickbait. This is actually what he's going through right now, and they've gone it. I mean, his last video that he did that happened. He was at the end. You could see, man. He was just like, man, I'm tired of this. It's just because you're a landowner doesn't mean you own the river.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
As somebody, I don't really want to get too political on here, but as somebody that's pro Second Amendment and carries a gun and owns several guns, like that, to me, that dude is a butthole to keep it clean, and really don't need to own a gun. That's the type of person that don't need to own a gun, trying to use it as a scare tactic for somebody that's not threatening him. To me, a gun, it can be for pleasure.
Hunting, self-defense.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to get at. As long as the pleasure is used the right way, go to a range or something and shoot off a few rounds. But yeah, it shouldn't be used like that, as like a scare tactic.
It shouldn't be used as intimidation for somebody that's not doing anything wrong.
Right, especially,
That's my point. That's where it becomes responsible. And again, I'm not going to get political on this and all that. I mean, I have no problem with the Second Amendment or anything like that. Having said that, there has to be a certain type of responsibility. You have a gun either to hunt or to protect yourself. If you hunt, then you hunt. If you need to protect yourself because you really feel there's a threat that you could be harmed, not because, you see a guy in a kayak. Well, if the guy's in a kayak, chances with 2 or 3 kayaks, chances are he's not there to rob you, because it's not really a getaway vehicle now, is it? So it's more like you don't want him on your land and you just want to intimidate it, and that's where it becomes irresponsible. And that's why I think me personally, again, nothing against the Second Amendment. I have nothing against it, but that's individuals that maybe should be considered not having a gun.
Yeah,
that's my opinion on it. When you're just using it to intimidate other people for no reason other than your own personal interest, which has nothing to do with self-preservation.
Well, to me, that's close to the same thing as brandishing a firearm, which I know here in Tennessee is illegal. Like just you get to an argument with somebody and you pull your shirt up and show your pistol, that's brandishing a firearm. That's illegal here. I don't know about Texas. I would assume that it would be, but.
I think we have open carry. So if you have a concealed weapon, you're allowed to. You should.
Oh yeah. Not an open carry, but like if you're like, I don't know, if you like.
You just can't wave your gun around.
Pull it out, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming it's the same thing. I mean, that's common sense, but I don't know anything about.
What's the law as far as the river goes up there, and landowner, like, can they own part of the river there? I know it's different from state to state.
Well, that's why we recorded an episode on it, because before we recorded an episode, I saw what happened to him, and I've seen him and like I said, and Hook Up the Grind. I've gone through much of it that I thought maybe you should make a video. We should make a podcast dealing with this, because this is serious. So I said, before I start, blabbing my mouth something I don't know, let me let me do some research. So I did some research, mainly through the Texas and Wildlife Parks Department website, and it's so. I mean, it comes to a point where it's just stupid. I mean, this says the river is defined either by state or statute or by logic or something like that, and then says, well, statute doesn't. There's no way to measure statute, so why even have it? Something like that. It was something stupid, but basically, there's so many factors. If you have like lands that were bought from Mexican laws, and I'm not a history buff on Texas. I'm assuming this is more southern Texas, but I guess there were some land grants from Mexico that eventually, those became, now territory of the United States, whatever it was. But anyways, if it was a Mexican grant land, then the law may applies differently. That one is whether, regardless of the size of the river or creek, you couldn't own it, because back then when those land grants were done, those creek there was no plumbing, so those were a source of life for people living, all the way to where the creek ends. So you couldn't own it. You couldn't own those creeks, no matter how shallow, how dried up they were, or their depth or everything. You just couldn't own them. So that part of Texas, if you happen to have Mexican grant land, you cannot own the creek, no matter how small it is. If it's not a Mexican grant land, then it is defined by if it's navigable, and that is, I mean, we can talk for hours about that. I mean, it's crazy. If it has to measure at least 30 feet, I think, wide or something like that, average between the mouth and the end of the creek. So even if you have a portion that's only 5 feet wide, but the rest of the quarter mile or 3/4 mile on a mile long creek is 50 feet wide, then those 5 feet are not considered navigable. It was just one thing. There's no way to really put, like, to define whether you can own it or not. Then there's land deeds that say that you're the owner of the river, but the state doesn't recognize it. So it says you're the owner.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
So basically, you own the bottom of the river, but you don't own the water, is what the state says. It's just stupid, man. It's just, I mean, I was like, yeah, good luck with this.
But it's crazy stuff.
It is.
Well, and you mentioned about not going alone on the river, and I think that's a good idea just in general because of the way the rivers can be. It's not like a lake where you're not going to, current can do crazy things, and if you're by yourself, then you're not exactly safe. So.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Even wildlife and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, there's so many things that could go wrong, and you get those flash floods where it's not raining where you are. It can be like great summer weather, but a few miles up, you get a thunderstorm with heavy rain, and that's gonna come down without any warning. It's gonna take you to wherever it's gonna take you. So that's the other thing. You may not notice. Oh, it's great weather. It's not raining. A few miles further up, you get one of those Texas storms that just dumps tons of water on you and upriver, and then you don't even know. You get blindsided by it, and God knows where that's going to take you.
Right, yeah. That's happened actually to me. I remember one time I went out and the wind was supposed to be. It was windy when I went out, and it was supposed to get better, and it actually got worse. And I was like, I'm just going to paddle upstream, knowing that I'll have to drip back downstream to where my car is. And I ended up catching a fish, but it got all snagged in my in the line. And so I pulled up everything, had everything sitting in my lap, untangling it. And by the time I looked up, I had floated back downstream, way past the truck. And then I had to pedal, actually, that was back when I had my Kusa, and I had to paddle like crazy just to get back to the ramp. And it definitely wasn't easy, and made me learn about making sure I keep my surroundings in mind and how far away I am from my truck and knowing I have to make it back to the truck. So.
Yeah. We got a few. The Texas Wildlife Department, Parks and Wildlife Department does a great job of having some trails. They have one in Guadalupe. And by trails, it's just it'll have an enter sign and an exit sign for the kayak, so they'll know, where it's safe and all that. And they have a few one in Guadalupe. They have one a few minutes from where I live. I tried that one. I only saw gars and carp and alligators. That's the only thing I saw. I was like, yeah, it's not for me. I could not catch a bass on that. That's the only thing I saw. But they have a few trails like that where it's just like, you can go and you can download the map and they'll tell you where is the safest way to exit and enter and stuff like that. So there's a few that I've been trying to try. I did try the Brazos River. So Brazos River has a few lakes in between reservoirs. It has the Possum Kingdom and then it has Whitney further down south. So I tried the Brazos River after the Whitney Dam, and that's my first experience fishing on a river. I loved it, man. And I really would love to go back and give that a try, because that is an amazing experience, just fishing in a river. That's something that I really hoping to get into more and more each time. But yeah, it's a great change of pace from a lake, and plus you don't get all the boaters.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of, the first time I went over on Duck River, it kind of blew my mind. Like, I went up river and where I couldn't even get through the kayak. I had to drag it over like this pea gravel because it got so shallow right there. And as I was coming back down, somehow a bigger boat, I guess it had a jet drive motor on it, was coming down the river from that way. I'm like, how did you get through there? It kind of blew my mind, but so I didn't think I was going to have to deal with any boaters then, but I did. But they're far and few between. That's the only people that's got like the jet drives and stuff.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So, Sean, you got any more questions for Armando?
I was gonna ask you. So you've talked to a lot of people, gotten a lot of good advice. What do you think is the best piece of advice you've gotten?
Oh man, that's a hard question. Let's see, man. The one with Dan Perry, we did fishing for ledges. I thought that was great. I do want to mention something for those out there that are learning to do kayak fishing. There is such a thing as too much information. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was pre-fishing in Ray Roberts for the Slay Nation tournament. And I did I went 3 times before the actual tournament. And I found some bass. I found my biggest bass so far. It was 22, and I think it was 22 and a half or 22 and 3/4. And it was, I figured it out, where they were. They were on grass. There were some ledges. So they were kind of spread out everywhere. So I really thought, man, I really could use a few more of those big bass, because that was the other ones were just like in the 15, 16 inch, but that 22 inch was like, man, and that's the only one that I caught on a semi deep ledge, something like 15, 17 feet, using the chatterbait on the not the jackhammer, the 1 1/4 ounce, the 1 1/4 ounce jackhammer. I love
that's a heavy jackhammer.
That's the heaviest one. So that's how I caught it. Now, between my pre-fishing and my tournament, I recorded a segment with Dan Perry, and we're talking about finding bass on deep ledges. And he introduced me to fishing the moment, what I had seen before, but I never really gotten into deep fishing moment. Great way to learn.
He is a good, yeah.
He is a great learner, but if you're brand new at kayak fishing or bass fishing, you have to pace yourself, because there's a lot of information there that if you're not ready for it, don't think just by listening to him you're gonna grab it. There's a lot of things you put in practice. So I talked to Dan Perry on. We recorded that episode on fishing for big bass and ledges. I brushed up on Fishing the Moment, which also had a few episodes dedicated to finding big bass on deep ledges. So tournament time came, and it was 90. The water was almost 90 degrees since early in the morning. Like it's 6 in the morning. The sun still hasn't completely come out. I stepped my foot in the water, and the water was hotter than the air around it. I felt like I was going into a sauna. I was like, God, this is hot water right now. So I immediately thought they're gonna be deep, and I just talked to Dan Perry about it. I just watched all these videos, and I struggled mightily on it. So I kept looking for deep ledges. I kept trying to get in. I could see him on the graph, but I wasn't able to get him hooked. I would go back to the bank for a little bit, see if I can find something. I got a couple of bites. I missed the big one, but I still kept going into deep ledges, thinking they're going to be there. I mean, the water's 90 degrees. There's not a cloud in the sky. Tournament ended. I got skunked. Didn't catch anything. I was fishing next to another guy. He was going the same idea that I had. He actually caught a 12-incher 5 minutes before lines out, right at half a feet of water. So tournament ended. I'm very humble in the sense that, and I thought that sounds crazy to say, well, I'm very humble, but what I meant to say is, like, I'm not above asking somebody for help and asking them how they do it. So the guy who won the tournament also got the biggest bass, and he caught a 23 and 3/4 inch bass. And I asked him, how do you do it? It's just like flipping a Senko in 1.5 feet of water. And here I am trying all day, going on deep ledges, trying to find the big bass, and everybody that on the top 3 on that tournament, all the big bass came on 1.5 to 3 foot of water. And that goes to show you, I've forgotten what I learned in the pre-fishing and just thought, okay, well, this is how it's supposed to be done. I have been doing it wrong. If I would have stuck with what I did in the pre-fishing, I may not have won, because good Lord, he got a 23 and a quarter inch bass. But
you might have caught that bass before him.
I might have been in the money, or at least not gotten skunked. And that's the thing about it. My recommendation to anybody out there is, you're gonna get great info, great tips. Learn what to use, and don't get away from what you already know. When you start learning to do kayak bass fishing or bass fishing in general, there comes a time where things kind of become an instinct. Like, I have an instinct for me to use a chatterbait and a jerkbait. Those are I think, and I didn't mention that in my top 3. I should have mentioned that. Those are the 3 that I feel those 2 that I feel very comfortable throwing. So if you're going to try a different technique that you're not comfortable with it, make sure you're taking the time to practice it and do it consciously. And what I mean by that is, for me, for example, I struggle with jigs. So there's going to be a day when I'm going to go out there, and it says, regardless if I skunk or not, I am just going to try to work a jig and find and try to get the best results out of it. Because I want to learn. I want to be a better all-around fisherman, a kayak fisherman. So I need to work on not only my confidence bait, but the ones that I struggle with. Now, if that's what you're doing, that's great. That you're making a conscious decision that you're probably going to get skunked, but you're trying to practice, get better at something that you struggle. That you should totally do. But when you're out there and you just want to catch big fish, and you don't care how it is, you just want to have a good day in the water, forget about any tournaments, forget about landing a limit, you just want to enjoy yourself and catch fish, then understand you don't always go with, oh, I just saw this video. Because we tend to do that, especially if you're new. I used to do that a lot. Oh, I just saw this video, so I have to do it. Turns out that video does not apply in this the geographic that you live, or the season, or that specific lake that just doesn't have that attributes that the lake in that video did. So grab information and then learn how to apply it before you go out there and think that you're going to have success on it.
I think that's definitely some good advice.
Yeah. I know I got long-winded on it, but yeah, fishing for Deep Legends Doctor with Dan Perry, that was still a great information. I did well with Chris Santoro too on how to do finesse drop shots on deep structure. That one helped me out a lot. I got a great tips on that. And there being others, my first podcast was with a guy named Mark Gamboa from South Carolina. He all he throws is swim bait. So I learned a lot from how to work a swim bait, which at that point is something that I struggle with a lot. So
that's pretty much all I throw now. So
yeah,
underspin. Yeah, I can't really put it down.
And you mentioned the fish of the moment. I'd love to. I mean, I've thought about reaching out to him to have see if we could get him on here too. I just don't know how you would narrow down what you'd talk to him about because he is a super wealth of knowledge as well.
yeah.
But
Man, I've heard so many people talk about that, and I think I've seen like one or two videos. But I need to go look more into that because everybody talks. So
I just like
highly of
his diagrams and everything. Like you know, he doesn't just tell you; he shows you like with pictures and moving diagrams and stuff. It's crazy. Yeah. So yeah.
That would be good for me because like you can tell me how to do something all day long, and I know this is kind of weird me doing a podcast where people are telling me how to do stuff, but you can tell me how to do something all day long. Chances are I'm not going to catch on. When you show me, like I got visual of how to do it, then I start catching on. But the podcast kind of goes hand in hand. What's your ideas? Go to YouTube. What are they doing on YouTube? Kind of put what I got from the podcast on there, and that's kind of helped me with all that. But yeah,
it's an extra tool. If you're just relying on podcasts to learn, I mean, for those out there listening, if you're just relying on us teaching you, then you're not gonna get the full spectrum of it. So you tie different things together. Time on the water, watch a video, listen to a podcast, and you kind of get all feels for it. You listen to it on your way to work. You had your headphones on. In your commute, you watch it on video when you get a chance on your breaks. You put it, you time on the water, and then those things eventually will come up. The one thing I want to say about fishing for a moment, again, I'm a big fan of it. If you're learning, if you just gotten into fishing, keep in mind this is like advanced level fishing. So you're gonna struggle to try to keep up with what he's saying. If you're just like you're just starting to fish out of a bank or a kayak, you don't have a boat. He does a lot of great stuff with electronics. Mm-hmm. But if you're not at that level, I mean level where investment, where you don't have a boat or you don't have a kayak, you're just learning, then keep in mind this will be a little bit overwhelming, kind of like same thing with tactical bassing. I love tactical bassing, but they break down everything so much that is to me it's like Lee, I'm getting a headache just listen to this guys. I mean, it's great information, but it's one of those things. If you're learning to go to kayak fishing and fishing in general, I mean, the ones that I recommend is Fluke Master. He breaks it down. He kind of dumbs it up for us in such an easier way to digest mentally than I think anybody out there. That's my personal opinion. Okay.
What's that smile for, Ryan?
Did I see something wrong?
No. I just sorry. I had something pop up on my phone. No, open it up.
You're the host, man. Come on. What example are you setting for me? I'm the new guy.
I know, Brian. Well, that's why I got my co-host who's not supposed to call me out about the stuff. But yeah. So the Cumberland
Sean has his own issues over there with all that.
I'm trying to get away from, I thought I had the, place to myself here, and then everybody's coming in.
I thought you were going through an earthquake or something for a second.
I was like, I gotta find a place where I can get back, but no, it's all good.
But no, one of the local kayak groups, Cumberland Kayak Trail, I just got a notification on my phone where they posted their schedule. I don't know, we have the KBFTN that does spring to late summer-ish, events, and then Cumberland Kayak Trail kind of does late summer to fall stuff, and they just announced their schedule, and usually all the tournaments are on Percy Priest Lake, Old Hickory Lake, and back and forth, and both of them are close to an hour or over an hour, depending on what parts of the lake that I'm going to. For me, well, they have an event on Stones River in September, which is the same place and about the same time of year where I caught my PB last year. They have one on Williamsport Lakes, which I never hear tournaments on there. It's kind of a TWRA ran area. It's got like 4 or 5 smaller lakes that are trolling motor only, all on the same property. So that should be interesting. So the smile was about that because Williamsport's somewhere. That's where my previous PB came from, and that's where my biggest bass of this year has come from.
So basically, you didn't listen to anything I said. That's what you're telling me.
He's just thinking about winning tournaments, man.
I'm thinking about like they're kind of getting in my element with that, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, thanks for calling me out, Sean.
Oh, my bad. All right, man. So let's see. Is there anything else we need to cover? Anything you wanted to say? I mean, thanks again for coming on, and we look forward to hearing the directions that you can take Paddle and Fin as well, man, because I mean, we've gone in so many different directions just since I've started. I can't wait to see how many different directions we go with you. And hey, and anytime you want to bring the Kayaking 101 back to Bass Fishing for Noobs, feel free to hit us up, man.
Well, and I talked to Brian about it, but the first thing I asked was like, how does Sean and Ryan feel about it? Because I don't want to, I don't want to step over anybody's. And I honestly, the way you guys do it so much better, I was like, I don't see the point, with it. I don't want to feel like, like I'm going to compare myself now to how they do it. So I was like, no, I mean, that's their thing. They've mastered that. They'll do it tons better than I can do it.
I don't know about master.
But I mean, the point is like, I was like, I don't want that. I mean, I was like, no, I don't. And that's why I gave him the idea. And I guess we can mention that. So starting July 26th, every other Sunday, we're going to do a podcast in Spanish with William, one of my surfing buddies that is actually big into kayak fishing right now in Puerto Rico. His name is Saul Ventura. So every other Sunday, we're going to record an episode in Spanish. We want to focus a lot on the Iron Kayaker, which is, I guess, is the KBF of Mexico. I know they use the KBF logo.
Okay.
And I know, so I'm going to try to bring some maybe trail directors and tournament anglers. We want to also focus on saltwater fishing, not necessarily shallow or inshore, because I know Dustin does a great job about that, but more like open water kayak fishing, offshore kayak fishing. We want to bring guys from everywhere from the Spanish-speaking community, whether it's in the United States, Spain, South, Central America, and kind of grow the sport, grow paddle and fin, and share information. I think the more the sports grow, the more investors are going to come in, and the more that you're going to see great products and more competitive prices are going to be available to us. And that's the thing about it. When something grows, we all go. We all benefit from it. Even people that don't like the social media aspect of it, and I can see why a lot of clickbait is thrown in, and I'm not a fan of it. But for those that do actually do social media, YouTube, and all that responsibly, and for the community first, for the tournament anglers and all that, if the sport grows in popularity, it's going to bring investors in. And yes, there is some negativity about monetizing some stuff, but at the end, I think each one of us can make kayak fishing their own thing. You don't have to do the whole social media thing. You can just ignore it if you're not a fan of it. You can still go kayak fishing. You can still do the tournament, and if you're not a fan of tournament thing, just if you do it just for the leisure of it, just to enjoy yourself and get out of the house and kind of like clear your mind, like I do a lot of times, that's fine. This is not the sport is going to grow, and it's not going to affect you if you do kayak fishing the way you want to do it. But you're still going to benefit from great products that are kind of come out there, because one company is going to either make a better product or lower their price on it. And same thing for kayak, not just fishing lures, but kayaks too. I mean, we see how the landscape of kayak fishing and the companies, some of them are merging, some of them are dropping out, and new ones are coming in. So it's I think it's great for everyone involved because everyone can benefit out of it. So having it go internationally, I think it's even going to be better. Not just Paddle and Fin, but just the community itself.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, do you have any sponsors or anything you want to shout out?
Douglas Rods. I recently started with Douglas Rods. I love Douglas Rods. I'm really proud of having that. That's my first big sponsor.
Congrats.
Or kind of pros, thank you, or pro staff, whatever you want to call it, business partner. Amazing rods. They're growing. I'm helping them branch out here in Texas. That's one of the things that I'm working with Douglas. We don't have a dealer right now, but I've tried the Douglas rods. They're amazing rods, and we can do a whole segment on rods because I've learned, and I don't want to make this episode longer than you guys wanted to, but real quick, I've learned the hard way. I used to think that having an expensive reel is more important than having an expensive rod. So I would buy a $200 reel and maybe a $50 rod because I think it's just a stick. And how ignorant was I? I've recently started using Douglas rods, and I mean the amount of fish that I would lose on on previous $50 rods compared to the what I'm using now with Douglas rods. It's amazing. I never thought that having a great rod, a high quality rod, not just because it's durable, it's gonna help you land more fish. Like I don't want to say the brand, but I bought a rod, $50, and I kept losing fish. And I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? I switched to Douglas rod, that same setup, and I think I only lost one. And more than anything, because I was getting a chatterbait through grass, and I think the fish grabbed more grass than it grabbed the chatterbait. It actually was a jackhammer, and it came off. You can see when it jumped out, it spit a bunch of grass out. So it wasn't even the rod's fault, but that's the only one. Even yesterday, I went to Friday, I went to Lake Fork, and I mean, I have one rod with my old $50 setup. My rod, it was an Abu Garcia. I had an Abu Garcia reel and a $50 rod, which I brought in as an extra one. And immediately I lost like two big ones, and I switched back to the Douglas rods because I don't even know why. I wanted to bring as many rods as I can, so I won't be changing baits. So that's the only reason why I bought that $50 rod, which I threw it away after that. So I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna spend more time rigging and switching baits on my Douglas rods. And I mean, I did not lose a fish on it. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Everybody has their own, and not just Douglas. But if you're learning to do kayak fishing, do yourself a favor. Don't think that you can get away with a cheap rod. Not that you can't catch fish with a cheap rod, but you're gonna lose a lot more fish that you would have if you had a high quality rod. I'm not saying spend $500, but find a good deal on a good quality rod.
Yeah, I just recently kind of started upgrading my rods from the cheaper ones, and it's kind of thrown me off. I've been on this Kitech and underspin kick, and the bite feels completely different on a higher quality rod. So now I'm like, is there like was that a bite? They don't feel like what I'm used to. I'm not used to feeling the actual bite. I'm used to the rod just getting heavy and setting the hook.
And that's the thing for those that don't know. It's just two things to me. It's the sensitivity and the ability to pin down that bass. And for those out there thinking, what's pinned down? It's hard for me to explain. Maybe you guys can explain it more. But when you pin down that rod, it just means that it's not pulling that bait ripping out of its mouth. It's pinning it down. It's holding it down. It's not yanking it out of its mouth, which happens with a lot of times with a cheap rod, especially if you're going like if you're going to a heavy, medium, heavy rod that's a cheap rod, you're going to rip it out of its mouth just because it doesn't have that parabolic bend that a more expensive rod has. So instead of pinning it down, it just rips it out of their mouth. And that's the biggest thing. The other thing, and then I learned the first time I had that Douglas rod, I started casting and I cast it into some riprap, and I nicked the line, just a little nick on it. I didn't notice when I was reeling it back in. I could feel something as I was bringing the bait up to like 6 inches from the rod tip, I was like, something wrong. Is my rod broken? Is my reel? Something's wrong. And I always kept, every time I bring the bait in, I was like, I feel something's wrong. I did not imagine that rod was so sensitive. I started looking at the line, and sure enough, there was a little nick on the line that was causing that little glitch. I don't know how to call it, but that little roughness when I started reeling the bait back in, and that's what was causing it. And that's how I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, I did not know a rod could do that. Like, I could actually tell if it has a nick on the line just because of its sensitivity. So that's the two big reasons why, to me, you use or try to stay on your budget. I'm not telling anybody they need to spend $500. If you can afford a $50 rod, that's all you can afford. Hey, do it. But if you can save the money and get yourself a nice rod and try to find a good deal, you don't have to buy it. Nowadays, you don't have to buy anything at full price. You can always get a deal somewhere. But try to get yourself a nice rod. Sensitive, and that's gonna, that parabolic bend that's gonna have, especially if you are using a heavy rod, because those cheap rods, it'll rip it out of their mouth like crazy. Anyways,
right on.
We're on a rant there. Sorry.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with us. Everybody, make sure you go check out Armando. Now, I know you're every other Sunday. Are you going to be every Wednesday?
Yeah, every Wednesday is going to be the Bass, Kayak, and Beers, which is going to be kind of like the segment that I had on my podcast. Was called The Real Life, which is just talking about life in general, and kayak fishing, not necessarily talking about baits and all that. It's just people that have a passion for kayak fishing, with tournament anglers, content creators, just regular guy who loves kayak fishing, and how life revolves around it. If everything works out well, I should have Cody Milton. It's going to be on Wednesday's episode.
Awesome.
We plan to record tomorrow. I'm super excited about having Cody Milton on the show. So we're going to talk about his life and how he gets to opportunity to fish all these tournaments, and the experiencing of living the life all of us here in the show and most of the listeners out there wish we could live. So it's gonna be a great episode. And then on every other Sunday starting July 26th, it's gonna be in Spanish. It's gonna be directly translated. It's gonna be Remos y Aletas, which is paddle and fin in Spanish. So it's gonna be
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that.
So everybody start brushing up on your Spanish now, so you can listen to that. Sean, you
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks for checking us out again tonight. Thank you, Armando, again. And this has been the Bass Fisher and Noobs segment of the Paddle and Fin podcast. We're bringing you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. Thank you, guys.
Love that.
later.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle_and_fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle_and_fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. TRC Covers, protect your investment. Catch Products, shout out to Catch Products. Go to catchproducts.com and put the Paddle and Fin logo directly on your catch board. Shout out to Jig Masters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com, use promo code PNF20 and save 20% on all your jig and tackle needs.